Alright, so I finished the Lewis and Clark journals, and it took a long time. It was a book that I could put down uh, pretty often. There's a lot of repeats by Clark. I think Clark was writing his journal entry twice in slightly different ways, and that was recorded, that was put into the book. I got the ebook for $1 off of the Kindle, and it's a long one. It's definitely a lot to read, but now I'm disappointed that I'm finished with it because it's interesting. I kind of want to learn more about their lives when they got back. There's a lot of celebrating, and they're excited to meet everybody and having meetings and all that. But during the whole journey, in the beginning to the end, there was a lot of questionable activity in the interactions with the Indians, and I'm not quite sure how to think of it, because there were generous moments, and then there were very sinister moments, and I haven't really weighed like the difference between the generous and the sinister. There were times where Clark would give an Indian tribe some medals, and he would get in return some horses. And then there's other times where they'd get another tribe would steal some pots or a hatchet or knife or some certain trinkets, or the horses. It's like every other, and sometimes every second Indian tribe was just a disaster. It was too. You couldn't trust which tribe you're getting into when you visited. They always had to be on guard. And what's interesting too is that Lewis and Clark wanted to trade equally, so they would get stolen from one war party or tribe. But if the next one just wanted to give Lewis and Clark some free supplies, Lewis and Clark insisted upon trading. And I thought that was interesting. I'm playing with these quotes. I'm going to play this one right now and just see how it sounds. Turn up the volume.
Two of these fellows met with John Shields, who had delayed some time in purchasing a dog and was a considerable distance behind the party. On their return with Captain C, they attempted to take the dog from him and pushed him out of the road. He had nothing to defend himself with except a large knife, which he drew with an intention of shooting one or both of them to death before they could get themselves in readiness to use their arrows. But discovering his design, they declined the combat and instantly fled through the woods. 3 of this same tribe of villains, the Wakalel Lars, stole my dog this evening and took him towards their village. I was shortly afterwards informed of this transaction by an Indian who spoke the Clatsop.
Yes, this was on the west coast. That was on the west of the Cascade Range. And there was a lot of problems just over there. Even the whole trip, it's like every other tribe, something like that. They had problems, and this one they had a problem with almost losing. Lewis, I believe, is the one who had the dog. Clark is the one who had the slave. But he lost his dog for a little bit. Later, they tracked down the Indians. Within 2 miles, he said he overtook them, but he couldn't quite say that because he got within 2 miles of the dog thieves, and they split. The Indians left the dog behind, and they recovered their dog. And this is west of the Cascades, where they practice eating dog on a regular basis. There was no accounts of any dog eating on the east side of the Cascade Range, and it was closer to the coast with eating dogs, and it's interesting how that works. There's a little clip about dog eating in here. Let me just get to it. All right. Oh, it takes a minute.
The dog now constitutes a considerable part of our subsistence, and with most of the party has become a favorite food. Certain I am that it is a healthy, strong diet, and from habit it has become by no means disagreeable to me. I prefer it to lean venison or elk, and is very far superior to the horse in any state.
And then in another journal entry, he talked about how the beaver tail and the buffalo are the most desirable meats to eat. But on the West Coast, they were limited to what was available, and that seemed to be dog. The Indians kept dog around quite a bit for their primary consumption. No. Secondary consumption. The Indians were willing to trade their dogs, but not the primary foods. There was a part which is pretty popular where the Lewis and Clark heard about the whale being beached on the shore, and they made a journey over there and checked it out and traded some whale blubber. They made some salt on the coast, which I visited in Seaside, Oregon, the spot where they evaporated the salt, about, I don't know, 20 or 50 pounds. I forget it. I didn't make an exact note, but it's interesting the things they prioritized. They buried a lot of things in the ground on their trip, and then had to mark where they did that. I think most things were buried, like pirates burying their treasure. I think most things are buried along the side of the water, just so they could more easily be found. They'd bury ammunition and just things that they felt would not be necessary, especially when they had to leave the river, leave the Missouri, and then cut through the Rocky Mountains. It was very treacherous through Rocky Mountains. People may think the Rocky Mountains are very healthy, but the animals and the food is very scarce. All right, and they had to actually go without food for a long period through those Rockies as they were pushing through. The horses had barely any grass. In a lot of cases, no grass. They couldn't hunt anything. Nothing was available. So that was very treacherous.
Wife who I found to be a sulky bitch and was somewhat afflicted with pains in her back.
Yeah, wife of a chief also complained of pains. The chief was getting treated, and the wife came up and complained too. Clark was treating a lot of medical conditions, and he said the primary was eye problems. People were having sore eyes. Yeah, there it is. Let me just mark, because he believed that they were caused by the reflections from the water, because the Indians spent a lot of time fishing.
Sore eyes seem to be a universal complaint amongst these people.
And I suspect that it's not that, and that it was the diet. There was a plant that was eaten quite a bit. Like a lot of tribes, the war parties would like hold down other Indian tribes. A lot of Indian tribes were not friendly to each other, so some Indian tribes had to go into hiding and had no opportunities to hunt. So they had to eat pretty much the roots. Lewis was calling them a cow's root. And I mean, all plants have their their side effects, and I'm thinking that one of the side effects for this cow's plant probably would have been that it dries your eyes, because blueberries like give you better vision at night. I'm thinking that there was probably, since they're eating this a root to survive in a lot of ways, it was causing side effects with their eyes. Because there was one medical case where Indian couldn't move his arms or legs, and Lewis said, or Clark said, that he thought that there was probably because they weren't getting enough meat. There was a lot of misspellings, and I'm waiting for a misspelling to be misread, but it's maybe if I turn the speed down for the reading to -2.
These people are very faithless in their contracts. They frequently receive the merchandise in exchange for their horses, and after some hours insist on some additional article being given them or revoke the exchange.
Hence, Indian giver. That's an Indian giver who does that. So trading was a concern. They tried to make trading as fair as they could. And towards the end, Lewis and Clark were running out of items to even trade. When they're heading back, they were trying to get the best bargains they could, and getting the most out of the Indians that they could. So it's hard to blame the Indians entirely for being bad at trading. They were bad at trading anyway. One chief, I think on the way to the coast, early on, east of the Rockies, the chief said he wished that his people knew how to trade better. So they resort to...
This morning, I was informed that the natives had pilfered 6 tomahawks and a knife from the party in the course of the last night.
So a lot of Indians turned to stealing because they didn't know how to trade. That was their system of trading, taking a war party out and stealing from the other tribes, or stealing from Europeans passing through. And the Indians had vast experience with European traders on the West Coast. A lot of the stuff a lot of stuff that was traded with European traders on the West Coast did reach the Rocky Mountains, because he recognized like a military coat some Indian was wearing near the Rocky Mountains. So a lot of that traded stuff would travel. But the Indians saw things that they liked, and
they stole 2 spoons from us in the course of the day.
They stole 2 spoons. When I see that, it really irks me. I hate to hear about things getting stolen that, you're using and the other person really doesn't need. They haven't figured out how to whittle wooden spoons by that point. I think that happened on the West Coast. I didn't take very good notes here, so it's things that are interesting to me.
Purchased a dog and some wood with a little pounded fish and copales. Made a fire on the rocks and cooked the dogs, on which the men
breakfast and dined, and that's hence having a hot dog. Pretty much, they ate a lot of dogs west of the Rockies, and not so much east, because there was just east of the Rockies, you had all these buffalo. The buffalo couldn't make it through the Rockies, according to their accounts, and it sounded like the last part where they saw buffalo was like with them buffalo falling over this waterfall and dying at the bottom, and making this big pile of dead buffalo in one of the mountain ranges. The buffalo had a hard time in water. They had a hard time in the mountains, in the Rocky Mountains. They were awesome in the plains. They did great, but they couldn't get over to the other side to run the plains west of the Rockies. So, is this? Okay, the Indians keep stealing things. This I don't have the dates, but this is progressive. These readings.
I ordered all the spare poles,
Okay.
paddles, and the balance.
Okay, no. I don't know why it skipped. This is a website, and I just need to do that.
I ordered all the.
Nope.
I ordered all the spare.
No. That's. How about if I get rid of your ordered, and.
They stole another tomahawk from us this morning. I searched many of them, but could not find it.
Yeah, unfortunately, he did recover quite a few things. And earlier I made a video about them having to kill 2 Indians towards the end of their journey, and they took the Indian stuff and burnt the stuff that they didn't use.
I ordered all the spare poles, paddles, and the balance of our canoe put on the fire as the morning was cold, and also that not a particle should be left for the benefit of the Indians.
So he burned his own stuff at one point so he could keep warm, but also he didn't want the Indians getting it. He didn't want to just give the Indians his stuff. And this may have been near a tribe that he did not like. But there were some tribes that they were willing to give guns to, like for very little, because they liked that tribe so much. But rarely they would give away guns.
I detected a fellow in stealing an iron socket of a canoe pole and gave him several severe blows and made the men kick him out of camp.
He made the men kick him out of camp. So he beat some Indian at some point. I'm not sure. I should have gotten the date. It would take a little more research to get that date. But he had a lot of problems with theft on the way. It's unfortunate but that's the Indians' lifestyle back then.
The former game is played with 2 bones or sticks about the size of a large quill and 2 inches long, passing from one hand to the other, and the adverse party guess. See description before mentioned. The nations above at the falls also play this game and bet high.
Yes, he describes a few Indian games that were interesting. One was a guessing game too. This is a physical game with bones or sticks. That guessing game, I did not make a copy of that. But you just hold out your hands and they'd guess whatever's in that, whichever hand has the object or something. They would gamble. Indians would gamble. They love gambling. This is their form of gambling. Guess which hand has the seashell or something.
Being determined either to make the Indians deliver the robe or burn their houses. They have vexed me in such a manner by such repeated acts of felony that I am quite disposed to treat them with every severity.
So he was considering burning some villages because of the Indians stealing, and this is stuff that I just, when I read it, I'm like, man, let me just copy that for later. And then I just kept copying all kinds of different accounts that he complained about.
Sore eyes seem to be a universal complaint amongst these people.
So yeah, sore eyes once again. Even his own people. That's the thing that really got me thinking that is probably the roots, because even his own people towards the end, they were eating that cow's root, and they started complaining about having sore eyes too.
The man who had his arm broken had it loosely bound in a piece of leather without anything to support it. I dressed the arm, which was broken short above the wrist, supported it with broad sticks to keep it in place, put in a sling, and furnished him with some lint bandages,
So they just
to dress it in future.
So they had some Indian had a broken arm, and they just kind of wrap leather around it. That was so Clark saw him and made a splint in place of that. And he did a lot of medical procedures. A lot of them for the sore eyes. He just had this eye wash of a certain chemical in there. I forget the chemical that he would put in the Indians' eyes, and the Indians would feel better, and then give them corn for that. He would make money in trading by doing these medical procedures. Also, when they were at Fort Mandan, it sounded like he actually said that they were able to trade corn with the Mandans because they had blacksmithing skills, and they were repairing and making blacksmithing items for the Mandan Indians. They set up in his party.
We gave small medals to 2 inferior chiefs of this nation, and they each presented us a fine horse. In return, we gave them sundry articles, and among others one of my case pistols and several hundred rounds of ammunition.
Yep. So he traded a couple medals, and then he got some horses in return, and then he turned around and gave some guns. So he was kind of one-upping these chief Indians. And I don't know which tribe this is, but this is obviously one that he had good interactions with. So he would reward the friendly chiefs, the friendly nations, and punish the ones that have just turned to violence and treachery.
This plain, as usual, is covered with aromatic shrubs, herbaceous plants, and a short grass. Many of those plants produce those esculent roots which form a principal part of the subsistence of the natives.
Yeah, he was taught many of the local plants that were edible in the region. But some roots gave him a lot of gas. Him and his people suffered a lot of gas problems while the Indians were doing fine. And that could have been either because they weren't also eating something that would quell the gas, or the Indians developed a natural like biome in their digestive system to handle the roots. I'm not sure about that.
These Indians are cruel horse masters. They ride hard, and their saddles are so ill constructed that they cannot avoid wounding the backs of their horses. But regardless of this, they ride them when the backs of those poor animals are in a horrid condition.
So they would abuse their horses too. This was I think it was on the west side of the Rocky Mountains, and on the east side of the Rocky Mountains where there were buffalo. After he killed the 2 Indians, and a week before he got shot in his hindquarters, he took the Indians' horses, and he found that these horses acted very different. Whenever they saw a buffalo, these horses would just dart out to the buffalo and start circling around the buffalo, just as the Indians had trained them. Not like his party horses that the Indians drove off that just carried the packs pretty much.
We saw a great number of the curlews.
And curlews is a type of bird. He recorded all the animals pretty much. All kinds of different birds. It didn't matter. He would shoot them. He'd be like, "Oh, that looks unique. Kill it." And he would kill it so he could have it in his hands and then make measurements of all the features from head to toe. Beavers and different birds and great bear. He had a lot of them ferocious bear killed. Well, for the meat and the hides, but also to study too. All right, I think
Two cures has raised my reputation and given those natives an exalted opinion of my skill as a fisherman. I have already received many applications. In our present situation, I think it pardonable to continue this deception, for they will not give us any provisions without compensation and merchandise.
So he was doing a little trickery with his medicine. If it was making the Indians feel good, he was just really playing it up, using maybe a psychology of the placebo effect in his exchanges with the Indians, because I mean he needed to acquire foods and help from the Indians. So he was kind of one of them snake oil salesmen, just like a modified snake oil salesman with a different goal, other than trying to sell a fake remedy. He's on expedition, but still it was living off the land too.
Sunrise is a universal complaint with all the natives we have seen on the west side of the Rocky Mountains.
Yeah, I recorded that again. I don't know if I recorded that same twice, or if he just keeps if he kept annotating that to different dates.
He wore two faces, that instead of taking care of our horses as he had promised us, that he had suffered his young men to ride them hunting, and had injured them very much.
He left horses behind with the Shoshone, I think the Sacagawea tribe, and leaving those horses behind, he wanted the Indians to take care of the horses, but instead the Indians abused them in a way. And when they returned from the west coast to the Rockies to retrieve their horses again, they found their horses in some serious conditions.
The paunch of the deer they eat without any preparation further than washing them a little. The fawns they boiled and eat every part of them, even the skins with the hair.
So they're saying that Indians ate the deer meat with the skin and the hair. These are Indians that are probably starving. The starving Indians are generally the ones who have lost the battles against the war parties, whoever their rivals are. So the poor tend to lose the battles and have to subsist on poorer conditions, poorer food sources. And so when Lewis and Clark came by, they're pretty grateful to have better hunting for the animals around them.
The cow's is an uproot of an irregularly rounded form, not unlike the ginseng in form and consistence.
So he compares this cow's root to ginseng, being very similar. And I mean, I think one of them, that type of root may have been what has caused the eye problems. It's hard to say.
The noise of their women pounding the cow's roots remind me of a nail factory.
So they had nail factories back in the late 1700s, early 1800s, and the Indians would pound on cow's roots and it'd make similar noise, maybe a tink, 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 something like that. Okay, so here's another report of medical conditions. Whoops. I don't scrofella. We'll hear how it's read. Ulcers.
Scrofella, ulcers, rheumatism, sunrise, and the loss of the use of their limbs are the most common cases among them. The latter case is not very common, but we have seen the instances of it among the Shoponish. I suspect that their confinement to a diet of roots may give rise to all those disorders except the rheumatism, sore eyes, and to the latter of these. The state of debility inside him to a vegetable diet may measurably contribute. So,
living off of a vegetable diet primarily, he believes caused a lot of their problems, because the Indians told them, this is what we've been eating. and these are the health problems that we're experiencing. What a study. I mean, that's as human a study as you can get. Okay, let's see what this says.
The Indians formed themselves this evening into 2 large parties and began to gamble for their beads and other ornaments. The game with which they played was that of hiding a stick in their hands, which they frequently changed, accompanying their operations with a song.
Oh yeah, they'd also sing with their scambling. I mentioned that before. It was a stick, not a seashell, that they held in their hands. So that was on the West Coast. That was more popular.
This was a great treat to those poor wretches who scarcely taste meat.
Oh yeah, scarcely taste the meat. Let's see if this reads better.
This was a great treat to
Okay, he's
We get
no,
this was a great
no. Okay, we'll get rid of that.
We gave the Indians, who were about 15 in number, half the female bear, with the shoulder, head, and neck of the other.
So they killed a bear and gave half to this friendlier Indian tribe.
This was a great treat to those poor wretches who scarcely taste meat once a month.
The poor wretches who scarcely taste meat once a month. This tribe's size was varied. Could be 50, could be 10 that they come across. It's really, I didn't really catch the counts for a lot of these tribe sizes.
Our dependence for subsistence is on our guns. The fish we may perhaps take, the roots we can purchase from the natives, and as the last alternative, our horses.
Last alternative, they would eat their horses, but they'd prefer not to. It'd be like us eating our cars or something. We don't want to turn to that till things are just impossible.
I am confident that this would be an excellent subject for electricity, and much regret that I have it not in my power to supply.
So he's talking about electricity, like they had electricity back then, because he came from a very civil society, and being a part of the government, he learned about a lot of the advances. I'm not sure what they knew about electricity back in 1804.
In short, it is not common to find 2 berriere of this species precisely of the same color. And if we were to attempt to distinguish them by their colors, and to denominate each color a distinct species, we should soon find at least 20.
See, he thought that there might have been different species of bear because there were so many different colors. It's like the different colors of humans, black, white, red. There was all kinds of different colored bear too, and they were all of the same species, like similar to humans. Maybe like difference in the types of dogs, all the same species of just different breeds.
We have 65 horses at this time.
They had at one time up to 65 horses to carry their stuff. That may have been through the Rocky Mountains, because I know they wanted to go in to the Rocky Mountains with a maximum amount because they weren't going to be able to find food or any decent places.
The Indians inform us that there are plenty of moose to the SE of them on the east branch of Lewis's River, which they call Tominima, are about noon served. Ordway Fraser and Whizzer returned with 17 salmon and some roots of cows. The distance was so great from which they had brought the fish that most of them were nearly spoiled.
So they may have fished and caught all them fish, but they had to go like 10 miles out and walk them back, and this fish would rot in that length of time. They had to hunt and kill sometimes animals way too far out to bring them back. And they would kill animals that apparently were unfit for use, he would say. He would kill it anyway. And then when he got to the animal and determined that it was unfit for use. He couldn't tell from a distance if it was fit for use or not. So you just shoot first and then check it out later, type of thing. And then they plenty of moose to the southeast. They would name rivers and areas, islands, they would name after the party, but I don't think a lot of those names stuck for today's, how we could describe today.
We find a great number of burrowing squirrels about our camp, of which we killed several. I ate of them and found them quite as tender and well-flavored as our gray squirrel.
Alright, he's mispronouncing squirrel because it's misspelled. There's only one R and there's supposed to be two. So there's going to be mispronunciations because of misspellings. They left all the misspellings in this book.
They dig away the surface of the earth, forming a circular concavity of 21.5 feet in the center and 10 feet in diameter. They next collect a parcel of split dry wood with which they cover this basin in the ground, perhaps a foot thick. They next collect a large parcel of stones of about 4.
Yeah, I stopped there because it describes how the Indians were making like a cooking pit or something to cook something large. It was 2.5 feet in the center and 10 feet in diameter. So dig down 2.5 feet, make it 10 feet in diameter, and that would be like a cooking pit, and they'd lay like leaves, and then they'd lay like wood, they'd lay the animal or something. It was quite this tribe had quite a system set up for cooking. They had to use hot stones. They'd have to put a stone in the fire, heat it up, and then pick it up and throw it in the water. That was their cooking. They didn't have pots. So it was a different, they had to look at cooking in a very different way.
When we first arrived at the Chapunish last fall, at this place our men who were half-starved made so free a use of this root that it made them all sick for several days after.
I'm not sure if that's a cow's root. It sounds like they could eat the cow's root with no problem. This might have been a different root. So they got a lot of gas problems from one kind of a root. They never talked about dandelion roots, which is and burdock roots.
Angelico in these mountains, much stronger to the taste and more highly scented than that size common to the U states. Know of no particular virtue or property it possesses. The natives dry it, cut it in small pieces which they string on a small cord and place about their necks. It smells very pleasantly.
Yeah, that's a description. I'm not sure exactly what that was for, actually. It was a certain type of animal that smelled good, maybe.
The does now having their fawns, the hunters can bleed them up and in that manner kill them with more facility and ease.
So they could kill the does easier because they have to slow down for their fawns. So that's a definite different perception from today, where we have to turn to sport hunting rather than survival hunting like they were doing.
Entertain us with setting the fir trees on fire. They have a great number of dry limes near their bodies, which when set on fire creates a very sudden and immense blaze.
This is like the Indian firework, just setting a tree on fire. And if you ever watch Stobe Hobe or Hobe Stobe's channel, he has a video where he sets a tree on fire similar to that. I thought that was interesting. So there's something, some people have put it on video, setting trees on fire just for the entertainment value, because they go up like a firework.
J. Fields, saying this, turned about to look for his gun, and saw the fellow just running off with her and his brothers. He called to his brother, who instantly jumped up and pursued the Indian with him. whom they overtook at the distance of 50 or 60 paces from the camp, seized their guns, and wrested them from them in our fields. As he seized his guns to bed the Indian to the heart with his knife, the fellow ran about 15 steps and fell dead. Of this I did not know until afterwards. Having recovered their guns, they ran back instantly to the camp.
So
Meadow last evening slept behind him.
that was the instant that they had a deadly encounter, and they called this war party. This is east of the Rocky Mountains. They called the war party the Minataris.
Minataris of Fort de Prairie.
Fort de Prairie, somewhere east of the Rockies, up into Canada. It sounds like they extended pretty far up into Canada.
The oil of this bear is much harder than that of the black bear, being nearly as much so as the lard of the hog.
So he could compare oils and fats between the animals and say and give his opinion about that. Some have different purposes for food preparation, for cooking.
The second time when the ball struck my left thigh about an inch below my hip joint, missing the bone, it passed through the left thigh and cut the thickness of the bullet across the under part of the right thigh.
So that's when he got shot. Lewis stopped recording in journals after he got shot. He even said, "This is it. I'm going to leave the rest of the journal recording to Clark." And then Clark made comments about Lewis's recovery.
Poultice of Peruvian barks.
Peruvian barks. Where do they went on this journey with Peruvian bark. They brought a lot of Clark had a lot of medical knowledge, so he brought a lot of medical gear.
Spring contains a very considerable quantity of water and actually blubbers with heat for 20 paces below where it rises. It has every appearance of boiling, too hot for a man to endure his hand in 3 seconds. I direct Sir Pryor and John Shields to put each a piece of meat in the water of different sizes. The one about the size of my 3 fingers cooked done in 25 minutes. The other, much thicker, was 32 minutes before it became sufficiently done.
So he was talking about actually cooking food in the hot springs. They come across a few hot springs and a few just cold springs, regular springs. But today we have to pay to see those. Every single one you have to pay to see a spring. But they could just walk up on them.
I observed a large lodge the same, which Shannon informed me of a few days past. This lodge, a council lodge, it is of a conical form 60 feet diameter at its base built of.
And then he goes on and describes this large shack that the Indians built for their meetings. There's a lot of abandoned Indian camps that they left behind, buildings and stuff that just, he'd try to describe how old they looked and stuff, how big they were.
Take this river to be the one the Indians call the Little Bighorn River.
That got my attention with Custer and his last stand, because he was defeated at the Little Bighorn. I wonder if this is the same area that was described. It's hard to research.
Wolf bit Sir Pryor through his hand when asleep, and this animal was so vicious as to make an attempt to seize Windsor.
So a wolf bit Sergeant Pryor on his hands. Sergeant Pryor actually kept a journal too, but I never read that. And he actually put his out before Lewis and Clark. But apparently he was bit on his hand while he was sleeping by a wolf. So, and then a wolf went after somebody else too.
This cruiser is nearsighted and has the use of but one eye.
Okay, so I think this was Clark describing Lewis's Lewis's shooting, getting shot in his hindquarters. Crusett was the guy who shot Lewis, mistaking him for an elk, and they describe Crusett as being nearsighted, and he only has one eye. That's good. So he's at a big disadvantage for making good judgment at hunting.
When he saw us last, we told him that we had made peace with all the nations below. Since that time, the Sayu had killed 8 of their people and stole a number of their horses.
So he's saying that as he was going by these tribes, he was promising that the Indians will be peaceful to each other. They should act peaceful. But then on the way back, he came across these same tribes and got news that they did not all the tribes maintained a peace. So it felt like a lie. It sounded like a lie to me that the great father of America will look over your people as long as you stay peaceful, and it turns out that was a false promise.
Offered to take his little son, a beautiful, promising child who is 19 months old, to which they both, himself, wife, were willing, provided the child had been weaned.
So they on the way back to the 13 United States, they brought like a party of Indians, and I think that child too, a young Indian child, but they wanted to make sure that it was weaned from its mother. It was just a way to integrate Indians.
Eyes. 3 of the party have their eyes inflamed and swelled in such a manner as to render them extremely painful, particularly when exposed to the light. The eyeball is much inflamed and the lid appears burned with the sun. The cause of this complaint of the eye I can't account for. From its sudden appearance, I am willing to believe it may be owing to the reflection of the sun on the water.
So now this is his own men suffering from this eye complaint, and he believes it's the sun reflecting from the water. I think it was the root. It was some root that they were eating. His own men towards the ends, their diet shifted and changed over time. From eating buffalo to then just eating just roots, then eating dog, then going back to eating roots and buffalo again. Their diets went through a lot of change. One guy died early on with the problem I get every so often, the inflamed appendix. His got so bad it killed him, and it exploded on him. And some guys nearly died. Lewis nearly died. He nearly got shot. He felt the winds of a Indian's bullet go by him, but he got shot in the hip. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff I'm skipping over, but this is some interesting stuff, I thought.